April was 16 years old. She lived in a remote small town with her family because of her father's militia practices. Her father was a lieutenant in the army who used to visit them only once or twice a year. April was residing in her ancestral house with her mother and one younger brother. Her mother was a working lady. She was an accountant in a firm. So April had to stay alone at her home after school to take care of her younger brother. April was beautiful and witty. She had won many trophies in debates and other sports. Her brother Joel was not as bright as her, but was good at technology. It was a weekend. Joel was out with his friends for water sports. Mother told April that she would go to her friend's marriage and wouldn't return before night. April was alone at home. Mother gave her instructions not to entertain any strangers in her absence. She assured her mother that she would follow the instructions. Mother and Joel left for the day. April occupied herself with her school assignments. Next year, she was about to go to university. April was very enthusiastic about getting good marks in her exams. She was studying hard to get a scholarship. She was a bright child. Their parents were proud of her. Suddenly, she heard someone knock on her door. Again a knock. Then again and again, repeatedly. April got scared. She wanted to know who was there on the door banging it. Her mother told her to stay inside and not open the ledge for any stranger, so she stayed inside quietly. Her mind thought, "Who is this?" The other voice replied that he was one of her father's friends. He had some urgent work, so he wanted to talk to her. April was not sure if she should open the door, so she called up her father, but his phone was out of network coverage. She became disappointed and hopeless. She called up her mother. She was busy with her best friend's marriage rituals that she wouldn't pick up the call that was ringing inside her clutch. So now she had to decide whether open the door and welcome the guest or say sorry and ask him to leave. She wouldn't want to make him feel bad as he sounded like someone who would be needy. She opened the door. A big guy with a massive build with thumping boots came inside the house. April expected one man only, but to her surprise, there was a trail of guys. 1, 2, 3, 4. OMG! Her nerves were numb. There were a total of 5. All of them were huge in build. The leader was more like a wrestler. She was scared. She barely could speak. Her feet got numb. Before she could pile up her courage, this man and his troop started rattling all over the house. The clump of their boots was enough to scare the young girl. The leader asked her if she knew about the box. She denied. She was curious to know about the box they were talking about. The terror dumbfounded her. The big man ordained other men to have a veritable check of the entire house. The clump of the boots going upstairs and downstairs was making noise. They checked all the closets, shelves, and every nook and corner in the house. No place spared of Boots' footprints. April ran into the pantry and hid in a corner behind an almirah. She was scared to death. Had she known those were goons, she wouldn't have opened the door. Now she was in misery. The heavy boots sound came to her as the leader entered the pantry. He searched and found her scared in the corner. He snatched her dress and pulled her. He asked her to come out of the pantry. She was sobbing. That man told her that he was her father's friend. They both were into business. He had to go abroad for some work. He gave all his money to her father and advised him to keep it safe. When he came back, asked for his money back, but her father didn't give him his money. He promised to keep his money safe, but refused to return him by saying he didn't give him any money. So he came here to collect his money. He threatened April that if he didn't get the money, he would not leave. He was so annoyed that she got scared and thought he would kill her if he didn't get the money. April cried. She said that she had no idea about his deal with his father. He never uttered anything about this in the family. He was not in the mood to hear anything. He wanted his money back. April asked him politely to leave the house and come again to collect his money in her father's presence. He was not agreed. The big man slammed his forehead with a gloved hand and asked his men to find the box. Following the instructions, those men went upstairs, clumping boots again to check the box. Suddenly, one of them shouted that they got something upstairs in the bedroom. They found a secret box attached to one of the closets to unlock with a number series. April was lending an ear to the conversation. Her heart was pounding fast because of this obfuscated situation. She wanted to extrapolate from this hell. April wiped her tear, which rolled on her cheek. Her inner voice was encouraged. She was a brave girl. She could triumph over her fears. This was an inflection point to get rid of lassitude. This self-enlightenment made her strong to store the courage that could save her from that giant man. Above one shelf, by default, she found a screwdriver. April, without wasting a single moment, grabbed it and hid it in the back of her jean shorts. She was sure that she wouldn't give up. She was the daughter of an army man. She stored her strength to fight back. The big man was back. This time, April was less nervous. He asked about the secret code of the box. He was about to end his sentence, but before that, April told him that she could help him to fetch his money. For that, he had to trust her. She said to him that her mother and brother both had gone away from home and they would return anytime soon in an hour or two. So it would be better if they find the secret code and he leaves the house before anyone else gets to know. He agreed. April knew that her father was a soldier, and he could never indulge in any illegal business. This man was lying. He was making a story that perhaps was to rob her father's hard-earned money. She thought, how did this man know about the secret box? There must be some connection. To get to know the details, she confused the big man. She told him that the secret code could be on his computer. He allowed her to use the computer with a warning that she couldn't contact any outside person. She couldn't pass his information on to anyone. Otherwise, the repercussions will be worst. The girl opened her father's mail ID and pretended to check her father's files under his surveillance. By this time, the big man and his fellows were tired and were busy with themselves. The girl knew what she was supposed to do. She quickly drafted a liner in another language and sent it to her father. She wrote, "Abducted by goons in-house." Her father decoded the message and alarmed the local cops of that area, but warned them not to take any action as those goons could have the weapons. He told them that he wanted to get her daughter safely. She spent a lot of time on the computer. One of them suspected her. He told his boss that she had wasted a lot of time. They should kill her and remove the attached metallic box with some weapon in case they couldn't open it. April thought that this was the end of her journey. They will kill her brutally. The big man approached her. Suddenly her phone rang. It was her mother. The bell was ringing. He asked her to pick up the phone, but not to react as if anything was wrong with her. She had a conversation with her mother, shivering and blabbering. Her mother asked her if anything was wrong with her. She said that she was not feeling well in her absence. To increase her anxiety level, her mother told her that she wouldn't be able to come home the same day. She would come a day after. The land slipped from her feet. She hung up the call. April was upset, exhausted, and ignorant that her father had sent cops for her. Cops assembled in the entire area. They were waiting for the orders to take action. Some military force was there too. Few of them climbed to the terrace by following the pipeline's fittings. They all were waiting for the orders. Her father also took a ride to get her rescued. April asked him to use the washroom. He allowed. She saw the cops outside and hid in the bushes from the washroom window. By now, she understood that her father had gotten her message and they would save her from the wrong people. Soon, one by one, military men entered the house from the terrace stairs. They fought with the goons and got them all arrested. They sent them into custody. April's brother returned home and discovered what had happened in his absence. He never knew his sister was that courageous. April called her mother. She panicked and assured her that she would come soon. Her father reached home too. April was curious to know why these goons abducted her at her home and why they came and what was the story behind the box and the secret code. Her father was the only person who could reveal the truth. She asked him about the box. Whatever he said startled her, as she never knew if something like this could ever happen. Her father told her that the big man who came by was his best friend and an army man. She couldn't believe this. But how did he become a goon? He was her father's roommate on the Army campus. They used to share not only rooms, but lives. So once in his vulnerable times, he once told his roommate about his life savings, ancestors' property papers, and everything he kept at his house in a digital box attached to the fix Elmira. This man was greedy. He was court-martialed from the Army for his unethical deeds. His father stopped being in touch with him after knowing that he was not a good man. He didn't know that he had rebellious traits. He wanted to take revenge on him for not helping him out. April's father was an honest officer. He wouldn't want to tarnish his image by helping out a corrupt officer. He stopped communicating with him. He came to his house to rob his earnings due to his old grudges. He wanted to teach him a lesson, but because of her intelligence, he had not succeeded in his purpose of harming the family. She heard this story and felt pity for him. Father asked her, "Didn't you get scared of him?" She said, "I was nervous, but I instructed my mind to calm down my nerves. I wanted to prove that I am your daughter." But she knew that destiny plays a vital role in anyone's life. His fate was to go back to prison because of his wrong deeds. The Smith family lived in the suburbs. There was a child in their family, a boy named Than, translated from Latin, which meant death. Than was encouraged in biathlon sport, and he studied perfectly. He had a lot of friends. He was the soul of the company, always cheerful and supported everyone. He loved everyone very much and wished everyone happiness. His friends would say that he was a perfect buddy and you could always rely on him. But one night, a misfortune happened in their family. Their house burned down. This happened on a night when everyone was sleeping except Than. He had had a bad feeling. Than's room was on the second floor, looking to the street, so he could jump out of the window and save himself from the fire. His parents did not manage to escape, eventually getting intoxicated with smoke and dying in the fire. Everything burned down. The firefighters came too late. Upon learning of such a terrible event, his grandmother immediately rushed to her grandson and took him to her home. It was hard to recover from what had happened, but the boy went to school 2 weeks later. Everyone in the school already knew what was happening. There were rumors at school that the boy was to blame for the death of his parents. They began to call him the Angel of Death. Once, when the boy was riding a school bus to his grandmother's house, the police stopped the bus. 2 policemen came in and asked the boy to get out with them. After getting off the bus, they said they needed to go to the hospital, but said nothing more. Arriving at the hospital, a doctor came out to the boy and said it was actually a morgue, and the boy needed to identify his grandmother's corpse. As it turned out, the grandmother went to the store in the morning for some groceries and had an accident in which she could not survive. She had a heart attack. At that time, Than was almost 17. Only sports helped to drown out the moral pain of the boy. The boy began to do more and more sports. Eventually, he became a member of the national biathlon team. At school, he used to have a lot of communication with different girls. He tried to find them in the love and attention he couldn't get from his parents. In his senior year of high school, he began a serious affair with a girl named Alice. Her parents were wealthy people. Her father was a local county senator. He was against such communication because the guy she had been dating had the nickname Angel of Death, so he would speak to his daughter. "Think about your future and your marriage. He would bring you nothing except poverty and disappointment." He said that Than was not capable of anything. The girl's father was so against their communication that he tried to separate them. He even found an expensive and prestigious college in San Francisco, located super far from their home, and decided to send his daughter there to study. The young couple stopped communicating a year later, as the distance dramatically interfered with their communication. The girl's father was happy with his actions. After the breakup, Than began to feel lonely and useless, and because of this, he became increasingly immersed in sports. A couple of years later, Than won the championship and became a gold medalist in Mexico tournaments. They decided to visit Las Vegas with his team and celebrate such a big event. During dinner at the hotel, Than saw her at the table and immediately recognized his first true love. But she was not alone there. She was having dinner with another guy she did not love. She began the relationship with him to forget Than at her father's request. The kids of the wealthy parents did not love each other so much. They would sleep in different hotel rooms. The girl slept in one room and the guy in another with his associates. But the guy's father was a friend of the girl's father. The two dads made an important agreement with each other, so they both didn't want their kids to go separate. There was an event for the evening at the hotel during which the two lovers came face to face near the restrooms. They looked into each other's eyes for more than a minute, and their old feelings flared up in seconds. Than grabbed her by his hand. With the other hand, he took her by the waist, and they merged in a passionate kiss. They went up to their room later and spent the night together. The following day, they woke up together, and Than asked why she didn't tell him back then that her father was against their relationship, and the fact that she flew away to study in San Francisco only because her father had told her to. Alice replied that at that moment she was afraid to argue with her father and agreed to move to San Francisco. The guy was shocked by the news. He did not even guess that she had left him only because her father had said so. Later that day, the guy flew away to his training with his team. For the next several days, he thought he did nothing to ensure that she stayed with him, but simply reconciled and did not even fight for her. He thought he would blame himself for the rest of his life for not holding her tight but simply letting her go. 3 months later, the girl flew to her home in Chicago to visit her parents. Arriving at her parents' home, she told her father the bad news for him. She told him that she broke up with that guy, and because of that, they had a severe quarrel. Alice told her dad that she was pregnant with Than's baby. Her parents did not believe her, and her dad went into shock. Her dad insisted that the child might have been from the son of his close friend. Alice told him she did not have slept with her so-called boyfriend for the last 6 months. The only night she had was the one with the athlete in a hotel in Las Vegas. Having learned such news, her father got angry about the fact because there was a big deal being collapsed because of it. Her dad insisted on an abortion. Her mom was pleased with her daughter. She did not want her daughter to have an abortion, but she could not argue with her husband on the other hand. Alice inherited her father's character, so she insisted on her own and did not have an abortion. After 7 months of pregnancy, she called Than and opened up about her pregnancy. Having learned about it, Than was shocked and decided to fly to Alice in Chicago. Arriving in Chicago at Alice's house, he and Alice's father started a quarrel. This made Alice sick, and soon she was taken to the hospital and she went into labor. At the hospital, she gave birth to a dead baby. Her mom and Than were distraught. They started crying at the hospital. Alice's father immediately started blaming Than for the happening. He started yelling at Than right in the hospital, "Get out! Get out! You bring death! You are the death itself!" and told him to get out of the hospital and no longer come close to their family. Than looked at Alice with a drooping look, and Alice, looking straight into his eyes, was in silence. Than left the hospital and disappeared into the darkness. 6 months had passed, and the guy met Alice in the training room during the next competition in Monaco. Having met Than's gaze, she decided to invite him to a peaceful meeting. Than was furious about everything and didn't want to see Alice. Because of all the past, Than no longer believed in himself and thought about quitting the sport. His coach informed Alice that Than was about to retire soon. To all the questions about why he wanted to leave sports, he replied that his girl had left him and he no longer believed in himself. So Alice decided to stay with him without telling him about it. Seeing Alice at home, he was shocked at first, but to some extent glad. They started living together in that house. Alice brought home a Doberman puppy 2 weeks later. They decided to name it Rexo. Alice took a dog into the house because she read somewhere that the dog would bring good luck home. After they had a dog in their house, Than and Alice began to build a relationship. Alice spent her time only with him. All this time, while Alice lived with him, she didn't communicate with her parents and did not answer their calls. Than decided not to quit sports, but on the contrary, he began to train even more. A month later, he left for training in Europe, and the girl decided to visit her parents in Chicago since she had not seen them for a long time. Seeing her daughter, her mother was pleased about her appearance as she missed her much. And her father was a little angry with her because she would not answer their calls and tried her best to avoid talking to them. While Than was training in Europe, they called each other every day. Alice decided to spend some more time with her parents. Than began to worry about Alice and began to wind himself up, thinking about why she stayed with her parents for such a long time. Than called Alice and tried to persuade her to come back to their home, but she wouldn't agree with him, and she didn't explain the reasons behind it. The reason was that she got pregnant again. Than was shocked and didn't know what to do. He started panicking. After considering everything thoroughly, he decided to come to her. He told her about his intentions. Alice said he should not come, and she would live with her friend so that no one would find out about her pregnancy, and she would tell her parents that she had gone to Los Angeles and wouldn't know when she would return. The whole pregnancy was going great. They would call Than every day, but one day, Than couldn't get through to Alice. He started to panic that something may had happened to her. He dialed her several times, but no one picked up the phone. Finally, Alice's friend answered the phone. She told him that he had become a father of 4. Than didn't understand what was going on and how it could be 4. The girl on the phone started laughing and showed a dog that had given birth to 4 puppies. Than started laughing, and then he asked where Alice was. Alice's friend replied that she was in the hospital and that he had become the father of a beautiful little girl. Upon learning such fantastic news, Than began to cry with happiness. Late on the phone, Alice showed him a newborn baby girl. While Alice was in the hospital, Than decided to surprise and visit her. He took a plane on the same day and arrived. Alice was happy to see Than because they had not seen each other for a long time, and it was an eternity for young lovers. When Alice saw Than, she immediately pounced on him with hugs. Than bought a gorgeous bouquet for Alice when they checked out with their daughter. Without thinking twice, they decided to name their daughter Raquel in honor of Than's mother. After being discharged, Alice went to her parents and offered to have lunch. At dinner, she told her parents everything. Initially, her father was angry since she did not tell them anything, but there was nothing to do for him, and he accepted everything as it had been. On the other hand, Alice's mom was pleased about this news, but she did not understand why her daughter did not tell them anything and had hidden it from everyone. And after that, they decided to call Than for dinner to discuss their future together. Alice was initially worried, but she had to come to terms with her father since there was no choice. Alice's parents decided to arrange a surprise. They prepared a room for the baby. The next day, Than, Alice, and Raquel came to dinner. When the parents showed them the room, they were surprised. The room was so beautifully designed that they didn't even know what to say. They all celebrated the arrival of their granddaughter together. At dinner, Than proposed to Alice. She was shocked and confused at first, but in the end, she agreed because she loved Than profoundly and wanted her future with him. The girl's father decided to apologize to Than for calling him the angel of death, despised him, and didn't allow him to communicate with his daughter. Most importantly, he separated them for a long and sent her to study in San Francisco. He said he was very sorry about this to both Than and his daughter. He said he began to go to church and was told there that it turned out that there were no black stripes in our lives, and you should not blame people for what they were not capable of doing. It was wrong to blame people for bringing death to someone else. When Matthew told his mother that he was getting married to June, his mother and sisters busted into a loud laugh. They thought he was joking, but his straight face showed he wasn't. "Why won't you leave this wretched girl alone? What do you see in her?" his mother asked in a bid to mock him. Matthew was sure his mother and sisters would kick against the idea, but he had already decided. "You won't change your mind, will you?" his mother asked, but he said nothing. His mother watched him as he wiped his mouth clean and excused himself from the table where they ate together. He dragged June with him. She had been sitting there the whole time, but Matthew's mother did not mind if she hurt her feelings with her words. When they were both out of sight, Matthew's mother, Marilyn, and his two younger sisters burst out into another laugh. They mocked June and Matthew for thinking they could both get married, even with the vast difference in their social background. Before Matthew announced his intent to marry her, his mother never approved of their relationship. She used to tell Matthew to get someone better that deserved him and not some peasant who was only after his money. Being from a vibrant and reputable background, Matthew was the only son of his father, Mr. King, and out of love and happiness for his son's humility, his father willed everything to his name. He left nothing for his mother and daughters apart from their house because he was sure they would squander all of his money on shopping and unimportant things, breaking them in a couple of years. On the other side, June was her shoemaker father's first and only child, Mr. Richard. Her mother died when she was still a baby because her father could afford to pay for the proper treatment after June's birth. Since then, they had been struggling to survive together. Mr. Richard did not have the opportunity to go to school, which is why he worked so hard to ensure June completed her education. He believed that educated people had an advantage in the world over uneducated ones. It was June's dream to go to school, too. She stopped at high school to save up for her fees. She worked in a small coffee shop in London and worked 13 hours daily to meet her financial target. June was a light-skinned girl with honey eyes, blonde hair tumbling over her shoulders, and a beautiful smile that could melt any heart. She was very hard-working, which was visible from how she worked in the coffee job. She knew her father's small, irregular money would not be enough to send her to school. And because of her cheerful and charming personality, she got lots of tips and encouraging remarks from the customers who stopped by the shop from time to time. The first time she met Matthew, he had come to the shop in the company of his friends. She went to them to take their orders when they were settled in, and their eyes met. For the first time, she became uncomfortable taking a customer's order. Her lower tummy churned at the sight of him, and everyone at the table could tell she was nervous. Matthew noticed her uneasiness, but he could not tell why. He loved her at first sight, but he tried not to show it. That day, she bumped into another customer and spilled hot coffee on her shirt. She apologized quickly, but the customer was already upset. She said many mean things to her and left. The rest of the day, June refused to come out. Her nice boss, Mr. Rowlings, tried to get her out of her bad mood, but nothing worked until he told her she could take the day off and still get her regular pay. And that was how she left. Maybe if she did not leave work early, she would not have met Matthew again. She met him outside taking a call, and he followed her when she saw her going in the opposite direction. He kept calling for her attention, but she ignored him and hastened her steps. She was already embarrassed by what happened and did not want to look him in the eye. She was just about to cross to the other side of the road when she felt a firm grip on her right arm. It was Matthew. She looked up at his face, and the nervousness returned. From then on, they would meet up with each other regularly till they became lovers. As of the time they met, Matthew had just returned from Canada, where he finished a master's degree in business, but she was yet to start her tertiary institution. The first time Matthew invited her to meet his mother and sisters, she could barely sleep the night before. She understood they were from different worlds, and her father often told her, "The rich will always marry the rich, and the poor will always marry the poor." Not that he discouraged her from being with Matthew, he only wanted her to be realistic about her relationship with him. When the day came, she wore the red gown Matthew had gifted her and a pair of black shoes to match. The dinner was set for 7 p.m., but she was already with Matthew by 6 p.m. Everyone could tell she was nervous from the look on her face. Even Matthew occasionally whispered to her, and she would breathe out almost after. Right from the first day, she knew Marilyn and Matthew's sisters would never love her. They teased and mocked her in Matthew's presence till she could no longer take it. Marilyn even asked if she stole the dress she wore because there is no way a lowlife like her could afford it. That night, when she went home to her shabby old house, she cried herself to sleep. Now there she was, after 2 years of deliberating if she was ready to marry Matthew and his whole family. She loved Matthew greatly and was not prepared to leave him. He treated her nicely and provided for all her needs. Most importantly, he promised to help sponsor her education at any school of her choice. After giving it much thought, she agreed to marry him and move into their family house. Because of Matthew's nature of business, he was barely at home, and he believed his mother and sister's attitudes would change towards June after marriage. But he was wrong. They only became worse. Whenever he was not around, they would verbally abuse her and subject her to different forms of maltreatment. There's even a time June was sent out of the house and forced to sleep in the horse stable because she spoke back to Clarine, one of Matthew's sisters. That night she cried so much and regretted moving in with them. Other times, Marilyn would order the maids to do nothing, then force June to do all the work. In her own words, June was there for her son's money, so she had to work for it. And because June had no one to stand up for her, she did all the work, cleaned the entire house, and washed all of Marilyn's clothes, even when there was a washing machine. She would go to the market all alone, cook for everyone, including the maids, and by the time she was done having her bath, they must have eaten everything, leaving her to scrap the remains from the bottom of the pot for herself. The most painful of them all was the abusive words Marilyn and her daughters said to her. They should say she would never amount to anything. She was slum material, and she belonged in the slums, and she would never carry Matthew's child because they did not want her bad blood running in her grandchildren. These hurtful words alone lowered her confidence and esteem. All along, Matthew was barely around. He was always running around from place to seal business deals, and every time June spoke with him over the phone, Matthew's mother and sisters would stand behind her to make sure she did not tell on them. With every passing day, she grew leaner and looked more malnourished. Meanwhile, Matthew sent in money weekly for her upkeep through his mother. Marilyn continued to get all the money, but she never gave any to June. She told her son June was pregnant, and she needed more money to take care of her and the baby in her tummy. As it would turn out, June was pregnant, but nobody knew, not even June herself. Marilyn claimed June was pregnant to get more money for shopping. She no longer made money from any of her businesses because of her excessive spending and lifestyle, and she did not want anyone to know she was bankrupt. She did not want to go below her usual standard of living, and she did not want to admit it to her son either. She lied about June being taken care of and how he would be so happy to see her when he returned. This encouraged Matthew to send in more money. The thing about Matthew was that he loved to surprise people. He refused to tell anyone the day he returned to London because he wanted to take them unaware, especially his newly wedded wife, whom he barely spent any time with. June was serving her mother-in-law and sisters-in-law when Matthew walked in like an unexpected visitor. When she saw him, she called his name in excitement, but fainted immediately. While Matthew and his family rushed her to the nearby hospital, Marilyn and his sisters came up with 1,000 reasons why she could have fainted, and that was when he suspected something was wrong. But he chose to say nothing until he heard it from the horse's mouth. A couple of hours later, June regained consciousness, and her doctor's report came in too. She was 2 months pregnant, but unfortunately lost it due to excessive stress and poor feeding. Stress and poor feeding? Matthew raised his voice at the doctor, but the doctor walked away. After the doctor left, he looked closely at June, lying quietly in tears. She looked leaner, tired, unkempt, and pale. She looked better in her father's house than when she moved in with his family. He turned on his mothers and sisters, who all wore uninterested looks. From their facial expression, he could gather that they did not care about her, and his mother had been lying about taking care of her. She lied about the money and every other thing. He was also mad at June for not telling him the truth, but after she explained everything, he understood why she couldn't. Matthew decided to move her out of his mother's house at that moment. They relocated to London, where most of his companies were situated. He also hired 2 maids to care for the home while she rested. Later that year, she took in again, and after 9 months, they gave birth to a girl. He also stopped sending money to his mother and sisters. Concerning June's education, she had always wanted to read botany because of her love for nature. 4 years after, she earned a degree and continued with her master's degree, after which she got a job in one of the highest-paying pharmaceutical companies, and the last time she saw Matthew's family was at the hospital. Matthew promised she would never see them again. The last time she heard about them, Marilyn had sold their house and squandered all of the money, and how she moved into a 1-bedroom apartment where she worked as a cleaner in a hospital. Matthew's sisters tried to beg him a couple of times, stalked him on social media, and even hired a lawyer to sue him for abandoning his family. Instead, Matthew reported them for stalking him, and they were forced to sign an agreement stating that they would never come near him, his family, or his property. This way, he could lead a happy life with his family and daughter. Their daughter, Star, grew up to take after her mother's looks and her father's intelligence, and none of her parents mentioned her wicked grandmother and aunties. Her life was better off without them in it.